you want to be in future? What do you imagine for yourself? What do you see for yourself? What kind of life are you living? When you think of pursuing education after high school, what do you picture? What do you think of? I wonder how many of you have thought of places outside of Africa. Most Africans of high school age, the instant conclusion is to go to the West. Maybe it's not your final resting place or your first job, but for most of us, that's where we think we belong. That's where we think we'll get better education. Do we assume we couldn't stay home and achieve just as much? Do we assume that there are better opportunities outside of Africa? Could we get and create the same opportunities by staying home? So what do I mean by home? Home is your continent of origin. It makes a huge part of your identity. It's where you were taught most of what you already know. Home molded you to become the person you are today. And for some of us, home made us face our biggest dreams and fears. The kind of moments and the kind of opportunities that I was exposed to by being home are far greater than I imagined, such as receiving an international baccalaureate education, venturing into my music, and finding my own sound. You see, home is where you bloom. It's where you thrive. It's where you grow. The challenges and the successes you meet by being home are contextualized in the space of your growth and self-realization. I'm not talking today to minimize the advantages that Western education has for aspiring African students, but I want to venture out into understanding why they would prefer abroad over studying in Africa. Why would someone voluntarily leave home to go and study abroad? And what pulls you to associating or defining success by the location and not the university one chooses to study at? Why would someone trade in the value of home? And what would be the reason why most African students prefer to go outside instead of staying home? Now, my answer was simple after thinking about it for a very long time. Your mindset. Your brain decides everything that you do. Our mind collects information from diverse sources in our environment and narrows it down to discernible information when making decisions. The most powerful of these elements, society and one individuality. Their wants, their needs, and personhood. As humans, we struggle to fairly balance these two and can easily be swayed in one direction or another and forging our own version of the truth. African society places a baggage of expectations on its citizens. When thinking of the Kenyan education system, success is found in a single way, marks, and it's rewarded in another way, better schooling. Kenya, among other cultures, pulls young students to believe that living is a reward or a right to hard work. This concept is at the root of our problems. It is a reflection of much greater issues to address. The pressure that builds within Kenyan students can be faced with fear or braveness. It can weigh them down or bring them up, depending on how they perceive it. Those who conform to the pressure keep Africa at status quo, and we enable a lack of communal change. And for those that see the pressure for what it truly is, can move forward and lead Africa as it should be. If you're from my family, you'd understand how these pressures came about. My elder sister, our firstborn, got accepted to one of the most prestigious schools in the world, University of Toronto, under a MasterCard scholarship. That was amazing. Our family was thrilled. She was our hope. Now, when my time came, it wasn't easy. I was very lucky and grateful to receive a MasterCard scholarship as well. Now, mine was in Ashesi University, Ghana. That's great, right? It's strange I should even be asking that question. But I remember wondering, would I be considered a failure because I didn't make it out? Because I didn't make it out of home? At this point, society weighed me down with immense fear. And I decided to take time to sort through my inner feelings and find out what my thoughts were versus my community's. Here are some of the thoughts that I discovered that brought value on my Ashesi acceptance, evidence contrary to the Kenyan stereotypes on African university education. Being born and raised in Africa, I've been taught how to relate with people of different calibers. We used to have a subject in primary school called life skills, where we were taught how to acquire different skills for survival. And every Friday morning, we used to have a session called PPI, where we were taught through religion how to relate to different people. Now, that made us become exemplary children and to be role models in our society. Now, I wouldn't be able to say the same for other continents. However, it's a phenomenal triumph to have such skills instilled in our young ones. Considering such an upbringing, why would we want to sacrifice such values? Unfortunately, a lot of our values are weakened when pushed into difficult cultural situations, such as integrating into a foreign college. Let me explain. One of my friends who graduated high school earlier than me went to pursue her studies. By the time she came back home, there was a change in behavior, her language, her dressing, her character, every time she came back home from the States. This was to the extreme where she would argue with her parents and curse them. Now, in psychology, they call this introjection. It's when a person accepts a foreign belief or idea of another community for the sole purpose of fitting in or surviving. Unfortunately, for most Africans that study abroad, this is a reality. Now, this got me thinking, does it mean if I leave home to pursue my studies, would I lose my upbringing? Would my higher education abroad come in the way of my identity or character? Are we threatening our connection to home? Exposure to the other side has led to negligence of the problems we face as a continent, and as a result, weakening our workforce because we're sending hundreds of qualified candidates away every year. Not all Africans return. Much like their emotional and intellectual attachment to home weathers, so does their physical, right? When Africans do come back, some are really surprised by the struggle to find a job. Since employment is not just handed to you just because you went to study abroad, right? Now, for these reasons, some returning students, African students, can't land jobs and they feel qualified for. And as a result, they leave home. I'll tell you something. I might not be Kenya's golden child, but I'm beyond excited to go to Ghana. You should seriously hear me practice my Twi and Iwi languages. That's not a pretty sight, seriously. Where you decide to pursue your dreams shouldn't be decided by society. So through feeding your mind with content that allows you to know your worth, you begin to feel less shameful to ignore society's expectations, and you begin to unearth the truth. Go on a journey of self-awareness. What you read, what you hear, what you see. Train your mind to learn how to filter pressure from external forces by knowing who you are and what it means to be African. Personally, I had wanted to leave home and go as far away as possible, never come back, and I'm sure somebody in this room feels that too. But then you know what I realized? Home is where you bloom. It's where you thrive. It's where you grow. And right there at that moment, I held on to that statement. Being African became the greatest privilege ever granted to me. It's like I was part of a grand plan, a piece of a puzzle, like I had a purpose of some sort. So I won't tell you, don't go away from home, but I'll tell you, see home as your first choice. See it as your reason to stay. If that's not reason enough, well, think of this. Do you know that Africa has the highest number of countries with the fastest internet, Kenya being ranked 3rd? So let me ask you a question. Where are you going and we got the Wi-Fi? Your success is not determined by the university you attend, but rather what you use that education for. You belong to a continent full of diverse opportunities. Every year, African universities are innovating new ways of unleashing their students' potential to challenge African problems. Universities like USIU in Kenya, LU in Kigali and Mauritius, and of course, Ashesi in Ghana. You are not mistakenly born here. We all have a birthright to push Africa forward. I guess that's why Katerina would say, almost nothing is presented on a silver platter. You have to really work for it. Thank you.